like, that's really the original life coaching model.
Yes, totally.
But yeah. So I see someone else just joined.
Oh yeah, hi John. I see his name is John. John, make sure that you are unmuted if you want to pipe up. We were just connecting. Lugitha and I met at BAM, which is a local women's group, years ago now, a few years ago.
Yeah.
So just reconnecting, find out how everybody's doing. But pop on if you've got questions or I can help you in any way. I am here to serve. I love being a connector. I'll just start off by saying I love being a connector of people, resources, ideas. Like, I love brainstorming for folks. So don't be afraid to ask if you need something in your business right now.
Well, so my big question right now is like everyone. Well, fortunately, my 1-year lease is up on Tuesday. And I'm literally considering, they said, it's fine to renew, they want me to, but I'm just thinking of letting it go and bringing the rest of my people either, online or by phone. And so it's weird to be so open to that, but because there's so many unknowns, I feel really okay about that. And so at the same time, my liability insurance is about to need to be renewed, but it would be different insurance I would need if I'm working only not face to face.
By phone, right. If you don't have a physical space, except
Yeah. So I would love input on that. It's like, so what do I need for liability if I'm just working by phone? Or, I would occasionally meet people in, common area spaces, like shops probably, or in their homes.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So, I mean, one, I think those are both good things to be considering. If I was renting a space right now, I mean, I think that this is going to take a lot longer than people expected to resolve. Right. So, I think financially that's a wise decision. That is convenient timing as far as the timing of your lease. Yeah. Not so convenient for the landlord, I'm sure, but in regards to liability insurance, so what I'd first recommend is that you contact whoever provides your homeowner's insurance. Often you can just have a rider added or an additional policy that will cover any work done at home. But for you, that's being done by phone, that's going to be very minimal. They will ask you questions about, like, are people meeting at your house? What kinds of business activities are you doing? So, so I would start there. And if they can't provide, I'd be very surprised if they don't. Most insurance companies that provide homeowners insurance also cover home offices. Like, that's going to be a very typical question for them to deal with. So I would start there. But yes, you will need something. The mistake that a lot of people make is assuming that their homeowner's insurance is sufficient and covers work that they're doing at home. And that's a bad mistake to make. So I would just start with whoever provides your homeowner's insurance policy, assuming you're happy with it. If you're not happy with it, could be a good time to shop around, because if you're going to bundle policies, you can often get savings.
Okay. So that's good. And then also, I know you do a lot of this work, is like, I probably need you to take a look at my website and just say, like, what I actually need.
Totally.
You don't need to take a look, but something in place.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I could do a quick website audit. So what you'd want to do is just drop your website link to me in an email at info@legalwebsitewarrior.com. Just shoot that over, and I regularly take quick peeks at what people are doing online, and then I can send back, some information for you.
Yeah, and I'm not doing that much online now, but that is my intention, is to do more groups online. So, I'll thank you.
You're welcome. You're so welcome. It's good to see you.
Yeah.
I'm glad you're hanging in there. I'm glad you already do a fair amount of work from home, or you're at least accustomed to that model. Because I think it's really hard on folks who are not used to it.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm just going to ask really quick, since John is on. John, do you have a question or a way that I can serve or support you today? And you are muted currently, so if you want, I can unmute you on this end. Some people join by phone, and then it's a little bit harder to unmute. So John, you're live. If you've got a question, I'd be happy to help you out. Maybe he stepped away. No worries. So,
He just
oh,
posted.
here we go. I see the chat. Can you go over best practices for starting an online business and website? Yes, privacy policy, need for physical address and phone number, ADA requirements, other big liability issues. Yeah, great question, John. So the basics are, and let me see if I can pull up a visual that I created, because this will help. Well, I don't know if I'm going to be able to drop it into the chat. If you want to drop your email in as well, I can shoot you over a visual that is kind of like it's like a quick reference list. But basically the activities that I cover for online businesses are if you're sharing information, right? So if you are publishing articles, information, tips, and I don't know what you do in your business, John, if you wanted to drop in a chat what your business is about, I could be more specific. But if you're publishing videos, you know, maybe you do video logs, you're doing blog articles, some people call them blogs, some people call them articles. Basically, if you're publishing through your website, anything that provides information, including information that other people can rely on, right? It's really common in all of the areas of entrepreneurship that I serve, that people are generally experts. Local client agency, accept, okay, there's your email. So local client agency, I'm not sure what that means. If you want to expound a little bit on what the nature of your business is, that would be helpful. But if you're sharing information online, providing expert tips, providing information that people can rely on, you want basically every exchange of value. If you go through any of my trainings, I talk a lot about exchanges of value. Anytime you're exchanging value, you should probably figure out whether or not you need legal terms in place for that. And in the online world, the trick is that we can know, okay, there we go. Reputation, client getting, lead generation, advertising. Okay, perfect. We can know how we want people to use our information, but we ultimately don't get to control how they do end up using it. So that's where website terms and conditions are really essential. Well-drafted website terms and conditions are going to tell people, they're basically going to have licensing language in place that says, here's how you can use the information that I share, here's how you can't use it. And then, by the way, here's some limitations of liability, here are disclaimers in place, right? So for me, you'll see disclaimers on my site because I'm an attorney, I have a licensed profession over here, and I also have an online information business over here. So I have to keep those things separate, and obviously I can't give legal advice online, and even in this setting, this is legal information, not legal advice, because I can't do that in a group setting. But you know, if you're sharing information online, you need website terms and conditions to cover that exchange of value. Let people know what they can and can't do. Website terms and conditions are really like the basic ground rules that are governing your site and people's use of your site. The next activity is if you are collecting information, right? So the first one is sharing information. The second one is collecting information. If you are collecting information, and that's really any kind of information, that can be an email, that can be a first name, that can be, even if you don't have a newsletter sign up or a lead magnet or a giveaway or any of that stuff, even if you've got Google Analytics turned on your website, which a lot of people do, especially if they have their websites built, that information is enough. You're collecting enough information through Google Analytics that it basically constitutes personal identifying information under the GDPR. So you need a privacy policy, absolutely, absolutely, for any data collection. And the privacy policy is the one thing that's required by law. So privacy, as most people are aware, is a really big issue. And these days, you know, depending on where you do business, depending on how you advertise, depending on whether or not you restrict people from accessing your site with geolocation restriction, which most people don't do. So for example, can privacy policy be generic boilerplate? We'll get to that in a second. That's a great question. Most people do not put restrictions on access to their site. So for example, I myself, I don't actively seek clients based in Europe, based around the world, but they find me and they end up working with me. And so I have to be very conscious that I have to be GDPR compliant when it comes to my privacy policies, how I collect data, what I do with that data, how it influences the data flows and the privacy practices that I use in my business. So for anybody that doesn't restrict data, if people can opt into your list or get into your database and they are a resident of the EU, then technically you need to be GDPR compliant. And I see we have somebody else joined by phone. Feel free to unmute at any time if you have a question. I'm just going over right now the basics of what online businesses need. We've got a couple folks who are wanting support with, you know, what to put in place around online business. So the first one was if you're sharing data, you need website terms and conditions. The second one is if you're collecting data of any kind, you need a privacy policy. And John, to your question, can a privacy policy be generic boilerplate? It could be. The problem is I can't advise you on whether or not that's sufficient for your business, partly because, you know, when people say generic boilerplate, that's a wide world in the online world of business. And I have seen all kinds of businesses that have you know, taken terms from another source online, have, you know, downloaded the free versions, have done all kinds of things to meet their needs. And at the end of the day, the general issue is that if they're not aware of the source and they're not aware of, first of all, who created those terms, what kind of a business they were created for, that's what they are, is they're generic. They're not well suited to that particular business. And that creates some problems because you really want a privacy policy that accurately reflects what data you're collecting, what you're doing with it, how you keep it safe, and is also beyond just posting the policy. You want a privacy policy that actually informs your privacy practices. So the other point that I regularly make is that that's what's missing in what I call the traditional legal world, as well as in most online services, including some of the template policy generators, is that there's no education that comes with that actually transforms somebody into being a better leader of their business in regards to privacy practices. And what does it mean to collect data in a certain way? And what does it mean to keep it safe? And how do you handle an opt-out request, or how do you handle a request under the GDPR once it comes in? So by way of example, there was a guy who works at a business that's quite well known. I mean, they do, I'm sure, many millions of dollars per year online. And they came to me and said, we got this GDPR request. And this was around the time of the GDPR taking effect, and said, you know, what do we do with it? And I said, well, when did you get the request? And he said, oh, about 4 weeks ago, about 30 days ago. You have 30 days to respond to a GDPR request and like actually process the information and do the removal of that data from all of the various places where you may have it stored. And as a data controller, so under the GDPR, there's both a data controller and a data processor. So for example, you as the business owner would be the data controller. You decide what data gets collected. But like, for example, if you're using Infusionsoft as your CRM, Infusionsoft would be the data processor, right? So there's different roles under the GDPR, but ultimately as the data controller, you're responsible to ensure that you respond appropriately to a request under the GDPR, and that your processors who are facilitating the collection of that information on behalf of your business are also in compliance, and that you work with any of those processors to make sure it's removed from their systems as well. So it's more than just plugging in a privacy policy. It's way more than just downloading something off the internet and plugging it in. Like, for me, what I care about, and part of the way that, actually a huge reason of why I deliver the services that I do, the way that I do, is so that people get not only the legal supports, but also the education, so that they understand how to use the legal tools the right way, what best practices look like, what they should actually be doing differently in their business, so that they're in compliance beyond just having paperwork in place, if that makes sense. And then the final category, so there's data sharing online, there's data collection online, and then there's selling online, right? And a lot of times that's selling information. Can also be selling services, but that's generally, for the people that I protect, it's generally services based around the delivery of information, right? So like, you know, in the life coaching world or any kind of coaching services, You might be doing direct one-on-one client services. You might be leading group workshops. You might be leading online calls that are open to a group. Like there's various ways that you deliver the information in your business, and it's through a service. So generally the folks that I support, which are coaches, consultants, online educators, experts, speakers, authors, and I work with folks that are also in the online marketing world, John, where you're delivering services, you're delivering information, and your online sales funnels also are around selling information, selling digital products, selling live products. So you could be selling live coaching, selling services, right? And what you need to have in place for the selling are terms of purchase. And terms of purchase are different than website terms and conditions, because website terms and conditions cover anything that's on your website that's available to the general public. But a lot of people get these things confused. They're like, oh, I've got terms and conditions up. Different than terms of purchase. Terms of purchase are specific to what you're selling. They're a little bit like the really long detailed receipt you'd go to a car, get from a car lot, if you went and bought a new car. Like, here are all the terms, the refund policy, and for information products, the reason why, or services online, the reason why terms of purchase are essential is because one, in the exchange of that service or the exchange of that information, you're generally disclosing IP, right? You're selling your intellectual property or disclosing it to a buyer in a way that truthfully creates liability for your business. Again, usually it's information that people can go do something with, or a service or information that they rely on, and they have expectations that it will do a certain thing in their life or their business. And so you need terms of purchase in place that protect that service or protect that information, have proper disclaimers in place around what it is exactly that you're doing, and what people shouldn't, the ways that they shouldn't think about it or shouldn't rely on it. And then limitations of liability as well, saying, here are the ways that I'm limiting my liability from certain kinds of claims, right? So for example, you think about the world of health coaches or nutritionists or anybody really who lives in the world of providing services or information around the human body. There's a lot of liability with that. And, people should not hold themselves out as experts or doctors or medical professionals if they don't live in that world. So this is why having terms in place specific to the sale is critical and is really different than just general website terms and conditions. So again, the three activities are providing information, right, available to the general public, collecting information that's covered by your privacy policy, which fulfills your obligation as a business owner to tell people what you're doing with their data, how you collect it, why you collect it, how you're keeping it safe. And then when you're making sales online, putting terms in place around that sale and letting people know, again, here's the engagement, or here's the agreement, here's what's changing hands, here's what you can rely on, here's what you shouldn't think about the way that I do my services, here's what you can't do with the information that I'm providing to you. And so they're quite comprehensive documents when they're done right, generally for the people that I serve. People often ask as well about disclaimers. So yes, disclaimers are super important. They show up in multiple spots. So they show up inside your website terms and conditions. They show up inside your terms of purchase. You can pull them out separately. So I often recommend that people have disclaimers that show up on their sales pages, especially if you are in the health or nutrition space, or even, providing coaching where people might get you confused with a psychologist or a therapist. Or, for example, I work with a lot of licensed professionals who are therapists over here, but online they've got an information coaching business, right? So it's a different business model. So having appropriate disclaimers is really important, and you want those to show up in key places, because it's really about educating the client, educating the consumer, so that they don't make false assumptions about what they're receiving. A disclaimer is also really important if you're business to business. So John, like for you, you are all about lead gen, advertising, reputation management, client getting, right? You're serving businesses and, potentially having impact on their incomes, right? Hopefully in a positive way. But something that would be critical for anybody that's business to business, especially around sales, earnings, income, is having an earnings and income disclaimer. You don't want people thinking, they're going to make $1 million, and it's all about, because there's so many online scammers. I mean, it's just the reality. The FTC has to watch for these get rich quick schemes, and anybody who's telling people that they're going to make a bunch of money by using their services, right? You have to be really careful around that. So particularly if you're in the health and wellness world, if you're doing anything around, mental support or coaching, and particularly if it overlaps into medical stuff, anxiety, different things, you just have to be very cautious, as well as making any financial claims. And so the disclaimers are important depending on what you're doing. And, having an earnings and income disclaimer where people know that there are no guarantees. They cannot rely on your services or your information to make them $1 million this year, right? So those are kind of the main points. There's additional things that people do online where it could potentially require additional documentation. So for example, John, I don't know the size of your company, but maybe you have an affiliate agreement in place, or you're looking for affiliates who can help share information and marketing materials about your services, right? You'd absolutely want, if you're putting an affiliate program in place, you'd absolutely want an affiliate agreement, because end of the day, you're responsible for what people are running around saying on behalf of your business. Even if they're out of line and they're saying things that you may not say about your business, financially can come back to you. And so having an affiliate agreement in place that attempts to limit that liability and helps clarify the roles and puts that into writing gives you an option to also sever that arrangement or that relationship if you need to, if they're violating, your marketing language or certain terms of the agreement. So, it largely depends on what people are doing online, but those are the types of things that people should be thinking about in regards to their online business. And I see another question, John, is Disability Act compliance a real concern for website owners? Have you seen lots of lawsuits regarding it? So it's starting. This is a conversation that is underway right now. And I expect that, it will take probably 10 years before there's going to be real enforcement in place against small business owners. Businesses of a certain size should absolutely be thinking about this. And from the standpoint that to the extent that your budget can afford it, you should be thinking about it as well. It is a thing, and we all need to be thinking about it. And of course, I would want somebody who has a vision or a hearing disability to be able to access my website and use it. Do I yet have the budget to build in, some of the technology that assists with that? No, I haven't done it yet, but it's absolutely something we all should be thinking about. And particularly if we're getting to the point of redoing our websites, investing more in our online presence. But it will be an evolving landscape. And I expect, like other things, that some of the lawsuits will start against the larger businesses before you see it trickle down to the smaller businesses. That's just my my instinct around, how enforcement actions happen, because they generally are going to start with the businesses that should have a budget to be able to handle these kinds of things. What is the best legal entity to use when starting an online business? So this can be, and it's a great question. It really is dependent upon what you're doing, and also your business goals. So for example, if you were somebody that was starting what I call a startup, like you're building something, you really want to get funding, you have plans that in 5 years you want to sell this business and spin it off into something else. It's a very different path than if you're building a business to work in it and be in it for a very long time, right? And the one has a very clear path, like you'd be starting a C corporation, you'd probably be doing it in Delaware. There's a very set path for startups if you're going to seek, venture capital or outside funding. If you are a solo entrepreneur, you want to start a business that allows you some flexibility, when it comes to tax election status. Most people ask often first about an LLC. It's a very good business model for a lot of the people that I serve, right? It's not a one size fits all. It's not great for everybody. Some people should be starting a C Corp. Some people should be starting a C Corp and making an S Corp tax election. Some people should be starting an LLC and making an S Corp election. And the factors that would influence that decision have largely to do with your plans for your business, what your goals are, including like whether you want to optimize for tax savings or whether you want to optimize for profit, showing profit on the books. And that has to do often with whether you plan to sell your business down the line or whether you are in it to keep it and work it and like be a part of your business for a very long time. If you're optimizing for profit, then you really want to show income on the books. You want to show profit on the books. You're less concerned about optimizing for tax strategy and tax savings. So oftentimes the business entity, and especially when it comes to tax election status, is really determined by your long-term goals. You know, some people might start out as an LLC. The thing, I'll talk briefly about LLCs, the thing that makes an LLC a good flexible model for a lot of the people that I serve is one, it offers liability protection, right? Which is what people want when they form a business. If you remain a sole proprietor, your personal assets are basically hanging out to dry. If you do something wrong in your business, your bank accounts, your business income, your personal income, if you've got personal bank accounts, if you've got a home, if you've got vehicles, if you're in a community partner state and your partner has any of those things, all of those are exposed if you are a sole proprietor. So it's not a good place to be. And basically, you know, the first thing that I teach on for any of my free trainings is creating your business foundation, which is setting up a proper business entity. An LLC is a great option for a lot of people because one, it separates out your business liability from your personal assets. It's a very flexible model, so it doesn't have some of the, you know, it's not as rigorous from a paperwork standpoint as a C Corp, for example. You still have to manage it properly. You still have to set up business bank accounts. You still have to do a lot of things to show that you're in compliance and you're treating your business like a business, but it does have more flexibility in the day-to-day management, in the tracking of decision-making and the way that you document things in the business. And you've got flexibility around tax election status, right? So as an LLC, in most states, your income is considered pass-through income, flow-through income, and you're taxed at the individual level, right, on your 1040C or whatever. You can change your tax election status. So let's say that you have a year where you jump in income, and just for purposes of having round numbers, you know, maybe you just started your business and then the next year you're making 100,000 or 150,000 or 200,000, and you think, oh, it's time for me to consider tax savings. An S Corp election could result in the tax savings that you want because a certain percentage of the income that normally was all taxed at the individual level now can be taxed via salary. So part of it flows through and you're going to be taxed individually on that. And then part of it you can pay out of your LLC basically as, you know, as dividends or as profit. And that's taxed at a much smaller tax rate. So the tax savings is in the difference between paying the full tax rate on all of the income versus a partial tax rate because you're paying it out in a different, basically a different tax bracket. You know, I think dividends or profit are distributed and they're taxed at like 6.5% versus like 13%. So that's where tax savings can occur if you make an S Corp election. But if you, let's say you have some either personal income or personal savings and you don't need to disperse all of the income in your business, you want to hold it, a C Corp election could be the way to go because that allows you to hold income and profits in the company without having to pay tax on it because they're not flowing through. So I'm not a tax expert. Obviously, I'm not an accountant or a CPA, but a lot of those decisions around what is the right entity have, again, largely to do with your goals, as well as your personal financial scenario and your tax strategy. So I hope that helps, but I just want people to have a little bit of the context, because whenever people are discussing entity formation, one of the first questions I ask is, do you have a CPA or a tax strategist that you're also working with, who's very familiar with your personal financial scenario and is really on board with your goals? A lot of people end up working with somebody who's a mismatch for their long-term goals, and they'll have an accountant or a CPA who is basically doing the planning based on where they are right now and not where they're going. And that's going to result in a major disconnect, and also you not putting the support in place for where you're headed. And there are a lot of conservative tax planners out there, or CPAs, who are like, oh, they'll just tell you you're not making enough money, so avoid the expense of doing a formal business setup. And I usually wholeheartedly disagree with that approach. So I hope that helps give a little context, but there is no one size fits all, but there, depending on your scenario, there's certainly going to be better options than others. Okay, if there are any other questions, because I see we've got somebody still on the phone, you're welcome to unmute yourself. If you're on the phone, I think it's *5 or *6. I always forget on Zoom because I usually do it via video these days. But feel free to unmute yourself. John, I'm located in Seattle, Washington. And obviously the caveat is that I only practice law in in Washington, and that obviously I can't give legal advice in the context of a call like this, but I can certainly provide lots of information and helpful tips. And I do work with people around the country and around the world on their businesses. But these are great questions. Any other questions for people who've just joined? Christian, I see that you're on. I see that we still have somebody by telephone. Very happy to help answer questions. If you missed the start of this, I'd recommend, and I'll share a recording of it, I recommend you go back and watch it, because we talked a lot at the start about online business and how to protect an online business, as well as, hi there, so happy to see faces, as well as, having that depend on what you're doing online. So we talked about specific protections depending on if you're sharing information, collecting information, transacting online sales. There's different things that you need for each of those things. But still happy to answer any additional questions that folks have.
Can you hear me?
I can. Hi, Christian.
Oh,
How are you?
Hi, everybody. Good.
Good. Where are you
nice.
at in the world?
I'm in Ontario, Canada.
Oh, okay. Awesome. So, I have a lot of friends and clients up in Canada.
Now, I don't know if I got connected to you through Jay Facette or one of the other connections out there.
Yes, Jay's
great.
One of my favorite people. I've spoken to his group both live and online several times.
Nice.
Yes.
So I guess my one question I kind of have, because we have a branch in Michigan.
Okay. And tell me what you do.
So we do staffing and outplacement.
Okay.
Usually the perm staffing and the outplacement when companies are downsizing, obviously. And so we do a little bit of B2B,
got it.
Corporate downsizing, plant closures, and then we do the B2C for resumes, career coaching.
Okay.
And I was looking for a way that we can eventually, both sides of the border, create some type of license or distributorship, not a franchise. I don't want to go that big, where people could, under their own company name, maybe offer or co-brand with some of our services. Have you delved into the licensing type of model? Or
yes, a little bit. And the thing to know, so folks in the states that I serve, especially around licensing questions, the licensing world down here, and it largely would depend where you want to go, meaning where your locations of who you're working with would be located. So there's licensing models, there's certification models, and then there's franchise models, right? And in the States, the franchise model is a really tricky one. It's federally regulated. It's very expensive to go that route, but sometimes it totally makes sense as a business to go the franchise model because, anyways, it largely depends on what you're doing, but the mistake that people make is they attempt to create a licensing model or even a certification model, and they accidentally slip into the franchise model. And if you create an illegal franchise, then it's big trouble. There's lots of penalties. It's very steep. There's no, and I tell people this all the time, but in the law, there's no ignorance as a defense. It just, you're expected to know. And that's the hard part, is because businesses don't intentionally do this, but it happens all the time. And so generally with a franchise model, the three things that you are, the three points that basically create a franchise model is that you've got a trade name or a brand that is being licensed. So, and it could even just be branded materials or branded system or branded information. They pay for the right to use that. So there's payment that trades hands. And there's usually a significant amount of training or ongoing support that happens, right? And that usually looks like, if you think of the regular franchise models, a Wendy's or a Burger King or a McDonald's, right? All of those things show up. Somebody's utilizing the brand name. It's a kind of a done for you system that they plug in. They obviously are paying for the right to use that. And then there's a lot of ongoing training, support, and control over the marketing message, over the branding, over the way that that person or that entity does business. And so the trick is that with a licensing model, generally people want their branding attached because that's part of the advantage. It's part of the benefit. They want people to pay for it. And so what do you give up? The ongoing control or training? Well, you have to have control in a licensing model, because if somebody's using your branded materials in a way that's inconsistent with your license, you can actually lose the rights to your brand. So it's a really complex world, and certification is very similar. Some people attempt to set up a certification model where somebody goes through training, they do a certain amount of time or tutelage or training within a model or a system, and then they have the right to use that system, right? So the waters are very murky. Basically, what I want you to understand is that I'd want to get you connected, and it largely depends on where you'd want to initially start doing business, because you've got the federal framework here that really governs franchise models, but then you also have state law that interprets those and apply. So it's a complex area, and I would not want you to venture into that world without really having some solid legal advice. And I'd be very happy to reach out and connect with you and get you some referrals depending on what you're looking for. But I'm sure there are folks who are more knowledgeable than I am in the licensing world. It's a tricky world, and you want somebody who specializes just in that, because it's very complex.
Okay, thank you for that. Yeah, I'll connect with you on that too.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd be happy to help you connect with any resources I can find for you.
Thanks again.
Yes, good to see you. All right. Any other questions? Anybody else have questions or anything? Even just pop on and say hi. I'm just happy to see faces and not be left to my own devices with 2 small children in the house 24/7. I'm very happy about that. Let's be clear. I'm very blessed and happy about that as well. But John is saying Google requires phone number and physical address to register. How can you avoid giving out your personal information? Great question. I don't know, John, have you tried, do you have a registered PO box? You might try that. And one thing which I have, so for example, if you're sending out, which I assume you are because you are in lead generation and advertising and marketing, I don't know what CRM you use. I use Infusionsoft, and you have to, obviously, to use any of those, you have to plug in an actual mailing address at the bottom of all of your marketing material sent through any of those, Infusionsoft, Aweber, whatever. You can use a PO box for that. And I don't know if Google's similar, but one thing that my local PO box did recently is they actually allow for physical delivery. That's usually the challenge, is that if you have something that is shipped via FedEx or via one of those other shipping routes where they have to require signature, PO boxes often won't handle those for you, which is why you can't list that as a physical address. Our local doesn't accept PO addresses. So the thing, John, to check with your local post office, because ours just changed this, I can do a pre-signature acceptance, which means they can basically apply my signature to packages or letters or anything that show up for me. And I can list their physical address as my address. So like, for example, even in Facebook, I went in and updated, because the zip code is really close. It's like one zip code away. I updated my physical address on Facebook because that's also what allows you to receive reviews. Google might be the same, but I would say check with your local post office box. I mean, post office, post office period, and find out if they will allow you, because I assume that the post office system is largely the same, that if I can receive, signature without being there because I filled out the paperwork in advance, you might be able to as well. And in that instance, they do allow you to actually put the physical address of the post office as your address. And then you just have like obviously the number still associated with it, but it's attached to a physical address. So check on that, because that might be a way to get around, right? It's not about mail delivery. It's just a red flag that hurts rankings. Totally get it. You might still check whether that's an option, because I've seen this issue come up before and people needing to actually provide a physical address. I personally am not interested in my personal address showing up anywhere on the internet. So I totally understand. And it is a little bit of a choice about, what your priorities are. But at least if you have a physical address, and again, I would just explore it to see if that allows your rankings to go up when people leave reviews. So I don't know. I'm not an expert, because part of the way that, well, actually my entire way that I've built my business is really word of mouth and like direct, old-fashioned picking up the phone and meeting face-to-face with people. Even though I'm online and I support online businesses, like I still have yet to figure out my own online marketing in a way that is, using Google and all these rankings and stuff. So but I would say start there with your your post office and see if they can give you a physical address in case that helps your rankings. So that's my best guess. Otherwise, the other thing to do is to rent, because I know if you don't go through the post office system and you go through like UPS, the advantage to using UPS is that you pay a little more, but you actually are allowed to use a physical address. So that's another option, is don't use a PO box, go to UPS and find out if you can basically do the same thing, use a physical address that's theirs. And then obviously you still have a number there. But that, that might be an option for you as well. Alrighty. So I think, I know we've got somebody still on the phone. I don't know if they've got a question. I'm going to unmute them temporarily and just say hi. If you have a question, please pipe up. I'd love to help you. And if not, just glad to have you here. It's a 407 area code. I'm trying to think where that is. Anybody know? I know 406, I think, is Canada. So I have I have a lot of connections. Yeah. You're so welcome, John. Thank you for joining us. I so appreciate you piping in. I know everybody stay safe. I know it's a really odd, weird time. And John, how to contact me. So you can pop into my email just using info@legalwebsitewarrior.com. I have a VA who helps me manage my emails. I get quite a bit of email traffic, but I am grateful to my VA, especially now. So email is a great way. I'm going to be hosting these weekly, so you can always pop onto the group Zoom so that I can answer questions and just be of service. I love connecting with people, and it was really hard for me, like it is for a lot of people. I had to cancel like 3 live events that I was going to be attending, basically this month and next. Obviously, I'm not booking any new events for the time being, but that was a way that I really loved showing up in my business, because I could meet a group of like 100 or 150 people and spend 3 days with them and talk to everybody. So, I'm doing this partly out of selfish reasons, because I just really enjoy connecting with folks. But you're welcome to jump on to weekly calls. If you swap emails with me, I've got a phone number in the bottom of my email that I share. For people that want to schedule a discovery call, you can just go to legalwebsitewarrior.com/discovery, and that will allow you to grab a spot that will get you 15 minutes on my calendar, so that if you want one-on-one help, I can serve you in that way. Do I know Valerie? You'll have to give me more information. I probably know a couple Valeries, but I'm not sure how you and I are connected, John. So you're welcome to share. You're welcome, Christian. Good to see you. Take care. I'm also I do a lot of connecting on LinkedIn. So if you're on LinkedIn, let's connect as well. And what other ways are there to connect with me? Those are the best ways right now. Email, group calls, especially since I'm full-time at home with 2 little people. But it's a way that I can show up and serve and answer lots of questions and provide support, because I love doing that. All right. Any others? It's the thing I love about Zoom, and the reason I decided to do it this way as well is, I mean, and I know the thing that's great about it is you can connect by phone as well, but I love seeing faces. I love being able to actually, you know, somewhat imitate real life and say hi to folks. So I'm happy that you guys all showed up today and joined. John, if you're still on, which Valerie are you talking about? And here's a Jay that joined. Say hello. Most people, when you join, your audio is muted. So if you want to say hello, just unmute really quick, and then you can either ask a question or say hi. Would love to see you. I'm here to answer questions. Yes, Valerie Del Grasso Del Grosso. So I don't know Valerie, but a mutual connection of mine does. So I know of Valerie. John, do you know Valerie? Are you connected with her? I know she's in a similar space. Jay, welcome to the call. If you've got a question, like I said at the beginning of the call, I'm here to offer up connections, resources, referrals, whatever will serve you if you've got specific questions. And I have recorded the vast majority of this call. And if you had questions around online business, go back and watch the recording, which I'll share on my page. We covered a lot about online business and protecting various aspects of being online. So that was a big part of the conversation. We talked a little bit about business insurance. We talked about licensing and franchise models. So that's what we've covered so far. No worries, John. Thanks for joining today. Good to have you. Be in touch if I can help provide any additional information or resources. We've got a couple people on the phone. Feel free to unmute if you've got questions. I see Jay, and then I see a 407 number, and I should Google where in the world you are, because I'm also just curious where people are calling from. But say hi if you want to. If you've got a question that I can help answer, I'd be very happy to. Let's find out, where is the 407 area code? Orlando, Florida. I should have known that. I've got a few friends down there in Florida. Jay says, hi, Heather. How likely is it that a bad guy would retaliate with a takedown notice to my ISP if I did it to them first? Also, how likely do you think it is that they would file a lawsuit in their state or country to retaliate a takedown notice before I could sue them? So good question, Jay. That a lot of people make the mistake of issuing a takedown notice or like a cease and desist, right? And thinking like, because you hear, I mean, the number of times I've had people ask me like, can I just send a cease and desist letter? I found one online. Can I just send it? Is you do have to understand the level of sophistication of whoever you're interacting with. I mean, I'd have questions. If you can go live, I'd be very happy to talk with you about this. Largely depends on the scenario, depends on the size of the business or the operation on the other side. It depends on the level of their sophistication in business. Also depends on the facts themselves about what the infringement claim is. So if they genuinely believe that they have created the content, that it's theirs, they may be likely to go file, oh my gosh, my brain is a little bit tired, but file a declaratory judgment. And so, yeah, if I'm in Washington and I send a cease and desist to somebody in Florida, they could easily file a declaratory judgment in the state of Florida that I would have to go defend, and that would be problematic if that wasn't in my plan. So generally, you want to really understand the level of sophistication, how committed they are to whatever the content that is involved in the infringement is, or the alleged infringement. The other thing I caution people against, I mean, and if you've got a clear path, understand, like, it's really clear that they have directly infringed your information or material. And oftentimes the way that you can show that, so like I work with lots of folks who, you know, they launched a product or a system or a course, and somebody went through their training, like they signed up, they paid them for it, they can somehow show a link that this person was exposed to their content, and usually in significant detail, and then went on to duplicating the system or recreating the framework and just calling it something different, or leaving the name in place, calling it the same thing and just putting their own name on it. So that the ways that people, I mean, it's just fascinating to me that people do this, but it happens every day. And I tell people, especially if you're good at what you do, especially if you're getting out there and you're really in the world delivering a lot of work, expect that it will happen. And at the same time, I also really caution people about jumping to conclusions. So I myself have had lots of people who use similar language that has been on my site longer than it shows up on theirs. And I have to understand that, you know, words that are typically in usage in the English language and in conversation, like, you can't prevent other people from using. And so sometimes it's just the case that people have similar ideas at similar times, or utilize the same concept or the same analogies or the same metaphors, and that becomes part of the language that they use. You know, be very careful about jumping to a conclusion that somebody has directly ripped you off or has duplicated your content, unless you can really show direct exposure, awareness, etc. That said, if you can show those things and you have a lot of confidence in the fact that it is truly your content that's being duplicated, then, you know, yes, you'd want to understand the sophistication level of the party on the other side or the business on the other side. You'd want to analyze all your options. So generally, when you have somebody infringing your content, there are a variety of options. You know, a cease and desist is one. You probably want to have an attorney helping you with that, that can help you assess the likelihood on the other side of a certain type of response. You can reach out directly. So one thing, because basically, with a cease and desist or any kind of language that would result in a declaratory action being taken against you, is signifying to the other side or the other person, you're infringing my content, right? It's alleging an infringement and alleging a violation. What sometimes can be helpful, and especially if you think it's your content, is reaching out and being like, hey, it's a very soft approach, like, hey, I see you, like, what are you up to online? You know, tell me about this thing you're doing. Not actually alleging infringement, but opening the conversation so that you make them aware that you're aware. And you still, like, without knowing the specifics, again, this is not legal advice. I'm talking general strategy about what can be done in these scenarios. So that's a very soft approach. I've coached some people around that, and that sometimes is enough for somebody to go like, oh gosh, yeah, they saw me do that, or they're aware that I'm doing this. What I'm also aware of is that a lot of people will infringe somebody else's content and just be totally ignorant of the fact that that's infringement. And I, you know, as somebody who is ethical, and like since the beginning of my career, I've taught on ethics. You know, actually what got me into law in the first place was taking a business law class and writing a paper at the same time in my advanced English course on legal ethics. Anyhow, it's amazing to me that, like, a lot of the problems that we face in the online world, and a lot of problems that entrepreneurs face with other people ripping off their content, would just literally be solved if people had a certain level of personal ethics about it. But they don't, and this will continue. And so it is a problem that, you know, requires strategic thinking around. And it can be a soft touch, it can be a direct hit, like a cease and desist, stop doing that, or like a takedown notice through their internet service provider or their web host, right? So there are ways that you can do that and require that. And what happens when you involve like an internet service provider or a web host is that under the law, that third party who's hosting the content doesn't want to be responsible for the infringement. And so they can do the initial takedown, and then they're relieved of all liability under under that specific scenario. If the infringing party puts it back up, the internet service provider or the website, the web host, is no longer responsible. They've done their part. They took the action. They are no longer responsible for that infringement. So that relieves them of any liability under that exchange. But yes, do some people just put up the content again? Yes, sometimes they do. Do they issue a takedown as well in response? Yes, they can. Do they also sometimes bring a declaratory action or seek a declaratory judgment against you? They can as well. And that again largely depends on, are they receiving legal advice on their end? Do they have legal counsel? How sophisticated are they in business? What's their level of sophistication generally? And then what is their experience with the legal system? So all of those factors are things that you'd want to have a bit of information around before you make a decision. Hopefully that helps. Okay. Oh, okay. It looks like Lubgeetha, and I'm so glad that I had her say her name. Lubgeetha joined and she had to leave. I will take the next step to enlist your professional services. Awesome. Yep, need to jump on another call. Totally understand. If we have any other questions, now is the time. Otherwise, I will sign off. Jay, did we answer your question? Do you want to chat with me for a minute? How was that? Alrighty. Thank you. Okay, Jay, you are still on. Can you represent me? So I can't say yes to that, Jay. It largely depends where you're based. So at the beginning of the call, what I said is you're in Nevada. So I could give you probably some strategic coaching. I don't legally represent clients outside of Washington State unless it's in regards to like federal intellectual property matters. And those are really specific case-by-case issues. But I'd be happy to jump on a call with you and learn more about this. You can go the way to schedule a discovery call because I can readily provide referrals, or we can, set up some other supports depending on what you're up to and what you need. If the ISP disputes are in a different state, would I need a lawyer in that state? It depends. It really depends on your strategy. So for example, if you are going to issue a cease and desist against somebody in another state, if you end up doing that and they sue you there, yes, you'd have to defend that action in that state. If you bring legal action first, you would likely want to bring it in Nevada, being that that's where you're based. I assume that's where your business is based as well. So you'd have home state advantage, but you'd have to bring legal action first. And no, I would not be able to represent you in Nevada. But I could certainly reach out to my legal listserv and get referrals to folks in Nevada who might be able to help you. So I'd be happy to do that. But some people, I've worked with folks around the country who sometimes handle these themselves or reach out and communicate themselves. And it largely just depends on what's happening in the scenario. But I provide a lot of coaching and a lot of strategic coaching on topics like this. How do you recommend finding a good IP lawyer? Is there a website or a referral? Yeah, I mean, you can definitely search online. I often reach out to my network for referrals because I've got a strong legal network here in Seattle. And oftentimes, like even when I'm asking for a referral for a certain kind of attorney in another state, I'm able to get one. The other way to find a good referral is reach out to other business owners in your state. So if you have colleagues, if you have other folks in business that especially if they're a few steps ahead of you in business, they likely have already engaged an IP attorney based in the state, or they know of one. So that's a way, is just to reach out to your direct business colleagues or connections. You can certainly search online. So depending on where you're based in Nevada, you probably have some very good local resources, especially if you're in one of the cities. You can often go to the State Bar Association as well. So you would Google Nevada State Bar, and they will have a directory of attorneys there, and you can usually search by practice area. So that is also a resource for you. And then yes, referrals from other people in business. I'd be happy to try to collect a referral for you. So there's various ways to collect referrals. Putting all of the possible names of my current and future products in my terms and conditions, and then send in that document to the U.S. Copyright Office. brand and product names with the US government. So trademarks, let's talk just for a minute or two about trademarks versus copyrights. Trademarks protect a business name, a phrase or tagline, right? So if you've got a signature product or course name, you've got a tagline that your business uses, you've got a business name that is maybe a brand name, or you can have a business name that is, you know, like mine, HJP Strategies LLC, and my brand name is the Legal Website Warrior. I've got a trademark around my brand name, right? But think of a trademark as really the top level protection, and it protects names, phrases, like short phrases, and taglines. So you think of like Nike, just do it, right? Copyright really is about protecting the body of the work. So that would be your website copy, any workbooks or digital programs or products that you've created. A video would be protected by copyright. So copyright protects all of those things and not the name. So for example, copyrights are really about the body of the work, protecting. So for people that develop frameworks and systems and methodologies, right? All of that would be protected by copyright. The name, the recognition of it, the brand name, the phrase, the title, the tagline, that stuff is protected by trademark. So I hope that helps. You're so welcome. Good luck to you, Jay. Reach out. Feel free to email me if you need additional support or referrals, but thank you for joining today, and take care. Stay healthy out there. I know it's super weird times for everybody, so stay healthy. All right. Bye-bye.